Hi guys, welcome to Holly Farm Fishery. Just something for a change. Jamie the cameraman's sent me a challenge to catch as much as I can on a bag of Fin Perfect 2mm pellets along with some 2mm expanders just for the hook bait. So here at Holly Farm Fishery, I've decided to fish on peg 28 on Trotters Lake. Now it's a venue I've fished for many years, not a lot, just in between. I come here about 6 times last year. I just fill in now and again when I've got nothing else on my usual venues. But Holly Farm consists of 2 main match lakes. This one that suits me down to the ground, to be fair, is called Trotters Lake, where you've got a nice big island all the way through the middle of the lake and every peg can cast to it. There's lots of little carp in here, which are brilliant feeder fish. I expect the fishing to be really good in the first few hours on a small 20 gram ICS method feeder. And then the way I'm going to plan the day is to start on that. And then after 2 or 3 hours, as it begins to die, as it normally does, I'm going to start feeding me margin for the bigger pace fish for later on in the day. So that's how I'm going to tackle this lake. The other match lake on this fishery is just down the slope to my left there, which is called Gills Lake. Again, another lake that's crammed with small carp. There's also some big fish in there, but it lends itself more to pole fishing. It's like a snake lake, so you're all fishing up and around islands, and baits like maggots and casters, fishing up in the water, which I used to do that a lot in my younger years, but I prefer feeder fishing and pace fishing for this time of year. And the way I go about it is a 2-pronged attack, like a plan A and a plan B. That gives me plenty to do on a peg like this for today's video. So I already mentioned in the intro that Jamie's set me a challenge to use nothing more than a 2mm pellet out of the bag and a bag full of pellets. So I'm a bit limited in the bait I can use. I think he's trying to handicap me catching too many fish, but I'm sure I'm going to have a good day with just 1 bag of 2mm pellets. It doesn't look much in the bag. How much did I weigh? About 600 gram, I believe. Yeah, 650 gram of pellets, which doesn't look a lot of bait. But when it's prepared properly, soaked in water, that'll swell up 3 times. So it's like, it equates to about 3 litres of bait. When it's in my EVA bowl, that's a 3 litre bowl, and it fills it to the top. So that's all the bait I've got to use today to catch enough fish for the video, which I'm sure I'm going to. The other bait is only allowed me to use, and believe me, these are 2mm when they're in the bag, but they're the new Pro expanders in 2mm. But once I've prepared them in cold water before I left the house, and they're ready to use, and if I've got a tape measure on them, they're more like 4mm now. So rather than try and bait stop them on a hair rig, I'm going to just hook 2 on a size 16 KKH hook, and I don't think it's going to slow me down whatsoever. I mean, my favourite bait, I've banged the drum about it so many times over previous videos, is a Pro expander in 4mm. and I'm 100% confident on that. So much so that I won't use any other hook bait on the method. It's the best. I win that many matches on it through the year. Going off my last match on Wednesday, same sort of thing on the method. 4mm expander on the hook, and it wins lots of matches for me. So that's what I'm going to have to fish under instructions just for a change, a bit of a challenge for today. So I'll start off, I've not even cast in yet. I'm going to start off by hooking 2 of these directly on a size 16 kKh hook. One point of note is these new bait safe containers. Because I like to keep the water cold in my expanders, especially on a really warm, this is down as the warmest day of the year so far. We're well into July now. But the great thing about this hook bait container is that it's got a sealable lid. So I can put my ice cubes in this water as I'm fishing with them and keep them cool. And just when I'm waiting for a bite, which ain't going to be long, I hope, I can just drop the lid on. It's got a rubber seal around it, and it keeps it a bit like a mini cool box, and keeps expanders really fresh. So I'll put 2 of them on and cast out, see if we can get a fish first cast. It might take a few casts to get the fish competing. It's a bit of a rhythm method, this is, so I need to get my head down. I'm not even going to consider fishing my margin in the early parts of the day. You know, that's just, I'm going to start feeding that when the feeder line starts to die off, which it typically does. So I'm just going to feed 2 of these on a size 16 hook and make my method up. So same rules apply. I'm trying to cast, I've got a little bay opposite, trying to cast in there as accurate as I can. I've not actually cast in yet, so I've done it before plenty of times. That was a bit short, but I say it's my first cast. I've clipped up there with an ICS cube earlier, but that's just a rough guide to the distance I'm trying to fish at. The next half a dozen casts or so will tell me exactly where I want to be. I might want to adjust the clip slightly because the lead that you clip up with is always slightly different to a loaded feeder. So then you need to adjust to get it. Yeah, I've got a fish first shot that looked like a bite to me. Actually, it looked like a bite, but there's no fish on. But I imagine once I get going, right, this is worth explaining as well, which I've missed this part out because it's early in the video, but this is the perfect opportunity to explain the rig I'm using. The rules on this fishery, method rules, state that your rig needs to be in line. You can use elastic, but in the event of your main line snapping above the feeder, which never really happens to me, but it could happen, you know, the fish isn't tethered. The fish can swim off and it just gets rid of the hook later. It's not tethered to the feeder. But the way I've got it rigged up today is different. It's one of my own ideas I've been using for years. When you've got, you know, when the rules are like stipulate how to fish on this fishery, it gives you the added advantage of using an elasticated rig, but you're fishing in line as well. So I've made that rig up, which I'll go into detail a bit later when I start catching a few, because this sort of method, trying to catch small fish, you know, you need to get your head down and concentrate on your casting. That way a rhythm develops, and before long, hopefully, you're catching a fish every cast. So it's really interesting today, and it makes a change that I've been set a challenge just to catch as much fish as I can using one bag of thin 2mm pellets and a few expanders for the hook. So it'd be interesting to see what I can catch by fishing with that limited amount of bait, although I'm sure it's not going to make a lot of difference because it's similar to the way I fish through the cooler months. I've just got to take my time a bit with what I feed, especially my paste line later on, because that requires the most bait. So the reason I'm using a small feeder is so that I don't use too much bait in the early stages of today. The bites immediately, see, that's every bite's going to come within a minute of casting out here. So, you know, it's really important not just to sit there and wait for a bite, else you won't get the amount of fish in your peg. Feels like an F1, not big carp, but we're not after big fish. This is like the early part of the session when you want to be putting fish in your net, and ideally finish on some nice big fish on the 2 mil pace, because that's all I'm allowed to fish with today. It's obviously a bigger hook bait than 2 mil, but the way I'm going to fish it, I call it my 2 mil paste. It's like a ball of 2 mil pellets round a size 16 up, which might sound a bit small for paste fishing to a lot of people, but I'll explain anyway when I get fishing it, the reasons for that. But for now, I've just got to get blinkered with my head down and catch as many of these small carp as I can. So you can see, I think I've briefly explained the rig, but that feeder's free to slide up the line when I've caught a fish, but you've got the added advantage of the elasticity, which cushions the fight of a small fish. You'll notice if you've caught a lot of small carp like that, on the way in they fight differently to a big carp. You know, they jig and jag on the way in, and that can pull the hook out on just a standard inline rig. So the elastic does help keep the hook in, and then all you need to do is, as it pulled the rig through, you just pull it back and the rig's ready to fish with again. But me explaining to the camera isn't helping what I'm catching here. I've got to catch a lot of fish here today on this limited amount of bait. As if I were in a match, my head's down, I'm not looking round at the camera, but I'm just talking to you guys. I caught that fish on 1 pellet actually, so that's 1 2 mil expander, which fits better on this 16 hook. Maybe if I want to fish with 2, I'd be better off with a 14, but I'm just using a 16 for now, and just see how it goes. Again, it's new to me this. Normally it's a Pro 4 mil expander, which you put on a 16, but it's a 2 mil now, but when it's swollen up it's about 4 mil. So you can see it's a really active way of fishing this, and your casting's got to be really good. It's a lovely little chuck on this lake. I'm on the clip, it's going exactly the same place every time. Expect about biters and burying the line. You can just see it going under. It's not gone yet, but any moment now. Lots of liners. I think that's on. It wasn't. So again, this sort of rig tells you when you've missed a bite, because the fish has pulled the elastic. It was definitely a bite that, but there was no fish on it. But the fish has pulled the elastic through, and the feeder can't slip back over it because I've tied the tag on the end of the elastic, which stops that happening. So you know if you've missed a bite, which is interesting. You know, you can learn by using different rigs like this. So before I bait this feeder up again, I just pull everything through and it's fishing again. Immediately as that feeder's gone in, I've had a fish turn on the actual feeder. Plenty of liners, the tip's going all constantly, but we're waiting for that savage bite. It's not got to take the rod right round, but it's just a sharp indication, which is different to the liners. I like that. So just building up to a nice rhythm here. I've got to get going yet. I'm still a bit rusty because I've only just started fishing today, I mean. And the good thing about these F1s and small carp, well, more the F1s, they just glide in. It's only until they're under the net that they start fighting. And just slide the net behind you. You can see that everything's pulled through the feeder, so it makes it a really safe rig. But you've got the added advantage of the elastic. It's really important because it's so warm today. Again, it's the hottest day on record this year. It's making my face sweat a bit. But because I'm using expanders as a hook bait, it really helps if you keep them cool. So that's what this bait safe container does really well. But to help along, I've got my flask, my dirty flask, which I don't drink out of. I've brought a load of ice cubes in that. So now and again, I'm going to be dropping one in the container to keep the water cold, and then that makes them nice and firm. You don't really need to bother doing that in the colder months, but during, you know, temperatures like this, look at that, fish straight away. It's important to keep your expanders cool. So I'm just going to get my head down for a couple of hours and catch as many fish as I can, keeping an eye on my limited reserves of bait. And then I've got to make a decision if I want to start early on the pace. Ideally, if it was a match, it's sort of 2 hours to go. I want to get on the pace, top up these little fish and catching one a chuck now. But I need the amount of bait to do it. I could do really, if I had my own choice, twice the bait as I've got, that should be enough. So I've just got to go a bit easy on the bait. Bit bigger this time. They all add up. Getting one of these a chuck, you know, after 2 hours you've got 30-40 pound. It's a great head start if you can top up with your pace fish later. I think this is a real carp, but only small. Tell by the way it's fighting. See the elastics pulled through the feeder again, and it's doing the job. It's still not really lost the fish yet. Just keeps the hook in on these little fish. The fight like this, you know, you get them under the rod and they're just trying to get that hook out of the mouths. Oh, right in the top lip. Probably see the tips. There's a mountain of fish out there, but it's just waiting for the right bite. That's the bite, look. And it wasn't on, so I expect the elastic to be pulled through this time. And there you go, so I've had a bite, but it's really interesting with these little fish. They can pull the rod round and it pull the line through the feeder, but you've not hooked it. So, you know, and that might, just supposing you're fishing with a fixed elasticated rig, you won't be aware of that because it's always in the feeder. So it just shows you that there's fish out there that can take your bait and not hook themselves. So there, I don't know if you've seen that, but I was just burying the line again, and a nice, decent bite that was. There's no hesitation. The tip just straightened up to the feeder because I'm pointing more or less straight at the cast, the little bay in the island. And again, feels all right fish, to be fair. Fighting like an F1 this time. It's just gliding in until it gets ready for netting. No, I think it's a carp. Been proved wrong again. Proved wrong again, it's an F1. It's because it's such a bright day. Where was playing the fish, you've got the reflection of the sun too. So it's nice F1, pound or so. I remember fishing this venue about 6 times last year. The first 3 times I drew on this lake, because what they do, they combine both the lakes, come off that, they combine both the lakes as a match, and it can be won on any lake, but I prefer this lake. You know, as I said probably before, I prefer me feeder fishing and pace fishing, and the 3 draws I had on this lake I won every match with weights between 170 and 212 pounds, I think the best weight was. Fishing just like I'm fishing today, but obviously I've not got a limited bait supply, and talking to the camera as well, which I'm in a rhythm now. I'm catching plenty of fish, but it's still not the same as, you get the drift, talking instead of fishing. Casting's the same every time, it's really important. And there we go, I got a fish straight away. One jumped out the water as it hooked itself then. And this is it, you know, I'm not even, just supposing you were fishing your margin for later, it's something else you have to do, which you don't want to be doing. You just want to blinkered approach, get as many fish in your net in these early stages of the match. I'm tackling it like it's a match today, although we're not in a match. It's only way no hour really. Elastic doing the work. Another F1. One point worth noting, because the fish are taking so quickly, I say under a minute easily, because it takes quickly, I'm still getting bait left on my feeder, which isn't ideal. You want all your bait that's on the feeder wants to be left back in your peg, you know, but because the fish are taking so quickly, then it'll pay to, when you use the mould, which is a lot into using the method mould, is not try and cram it on hard. You want plenty of water in your pellets so they're nice and soft and sticky, but don't put them on too hard, because even if a fish takes it quickly, you want most of the pellets to come off where you've cast the feeder. That in turn builds your peg up and gets more fish competing in that area. No bigger than a dinner plate I'm casting. All right, there's no wind to battle against here today on the clip, and it's I'm really happy with my casting up to now. And the fish straight away. It feels a bit bigger. There literally must be a ball of fish just get on that feeder. They must be that hungry to get bites this quickly. That's why it's so important just to hook your expander on, rather than, you can imagine if we were messing about with a bait stop and a needle, I'd catch another fish in the time it takes you to do that. So it speeds you up no end. And the rod is absolutely made for this game. It's a Superior X in 11 foot. I could use a 10 foot, but I like the extra length for the action you get playing these little fish, so they don't spring off the hook. This is a real carp, a bit bigger than the last few I've had. This little comment. One hooked itself in the net. So again, you can see how solid it is. Most of the times I'm going in there, the tip just goes straight because it's pointing at the bay I'm casting in. It tells me there's a fish on, and it's absolutely solid. So I'm just going to get my head down for an hour and a half or so and see what I can amass in this time before I start feeding my margin peg. So I've come to the end of my feeder session. To be honest, it's been relentless. I said earlier that normally it dies after a few hours, but it hasn't done. I've literally had a fish, well, not every cast, but I've had a bite every cast. You're just relying on the fish to hook itself, which doesn't always happen. So now what I'm going to do, I'm going to hang this rig up and I'm going to think about feeding my margin peg. There's quite a few fish, because it's a really warm day today, there's quite a few fish just cruising around. I don't really think they've got any intention of feeding at the moment, and we are pushing it, to be fair. Ideally, the time wants to be somewhere definitely past 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock onwards ideally, but I've easily attained my £30 target weight for my early section of the match if I was in a match. So I'm going to set to and feed my margin peg. So it's exactly the same bait as I've been using, but my actual paste bait, my 2mm pellets that I'll be using as paste, will want to be a bit wetter. Always make them a bit wetter and heavier than the loose feed I'm throwing in. So the way I like to go about feeding my margin is there's no cup anywhere. I don't do, all right, cups are better when it's colder, I think, in the cooler months. But this time of year, if you're fishing short, then throwing it in's the way. You're making a lot more noise and you can feed it more regular. It's more convenient to feed it regular. So really simple. Again, I'm getting quite low on bait. I've used possibly a quarter of me 3 litres of pellets, so just over a litre, but that means I've got nearly 2 litres of pellets to concentrate on my margin. So I've already plumbed my margin. It's I'm going to fish it to hand with my rig, I'll show you in a minute, to hand with a top kit, which puts you on top kit +1 if you're fishing with a short line. So I'll be using a long line to hand and fishing my paste on that. So I've plumbed my depth and I know exactly where to throw this initial feed of pellets. And it's not really crucial how accurate you are, as long as you're next to the bank and in that general area. And because it's a time of day and it's a bit early, there's no real need to get on that straight away. Normally I'm still on the feeder and I'm just looking down to the left to see if I can see some signs of fish tailing up on the bait I've just fed. It's fairly shallow. I've got about 2.5 foot in my margin, which if there's any sizable fish that come on my bait, I'll see commotion, tail patterns and an odd swirl that will tell me it's time to get down there. But obviously I've just thrown them pellets in and think I'm going to have to wait normally about half hour before you see some signs. But initial heavy feeding of bait, like I'm doing at the moment, can suddenly bring fish in. Rather than you just trickle bait in there through the day, I think it's better just concentrating on your feeder and get as many fish in your net in that early period, and then just bombard your margin with a heavy feed, and that can instantly bring fish into your margin. So just before I try my margin peg, I'll just run through the 2 rigs I've got set up for this style of fishing. And to be honest, all this year I've fished similar to how I'm fishing today. Normally I choose my venue which has got an island, so I really enjoy feeder fishing. I do really well at it, and to be fair, probably 60% of the matches I win in the year is from feeder fishing. And the other, I'd say 30%, well I don't know, 20-30% of matches I won fishing paste in this way I'm going to fish it. And the other matches I win are through the winter months, bomb fishing and long pole pellet fishing. There's styles I do. So I'll run through the rigs I'm going to fish my margin today after I've just fed not as much as I'd like to feed in my margin because I'm limited to bait today, of course, but I'm hoping within 15-30 minutes I'll see signs of some proper fish down there. So starting from the hook end, one of my favourite hooks for this type of 2mm paste fishing, as I call it. Essentially it's just a ball of 2mm that are made a bit wetter than the softened pellets I'm throwing in, just so that you get a bit more time for a bite because they stick to the hook a bit better. So it's an XSHB hook in a 16. Now that's a really small hook for paste fishing, a lot of anglers might think, but the way the 2mm paste works is different to the big sloppy lumps that I used to fish and still do to time, but this is my go-to paste now, the heavy feeding of micros in the margin and fishing a ball of micros as a paste over it. So that's my favourite hook. It's a 16 XSHB. It's tied to 0.17 length of power line. There's no hook length, it's just straight through for strength, that is. And all right, you might argue if I get broke somewhere between the float and the hook, I've got to tie another hook on which will shorten the rig, which is true, but most of the time it's lower down in the rig and I get by tying another hook on. Or I've got plenty of duplicates in my tray, in my winder drawer in my box if the worst happens. So that length is just sort of to where the puller kit starts, and I find that about right. And what that corresponds with is when I plumb the peg up, if I put my number 3 section into my top kit, clean that out a bit, and fish that at full length, that's where my float's going to end up if I'm fishing it to hand. So I plumb up there like this with a plummet on, obviously. Again, just had a swirl then, so it looks like there's fish there already. And that's what I was saying about that initial bombardment, heavy feeding, it can get fish straight in the peg. And you know, I'll be fishing this after I've explained my rig. And so that's the length of my rig covered. It's the you can imagine if I take this number 3 off now, then I'm fishing to hand. Okay, so that's the area I've fed and have plumbed up. So moving up from the hook, 0.17 power line, it's a 412's excess carp float, which is really strong. The float I use through the year, the pattern I use mostly is the carp pellet in 412s and 414 with a wire stem, and you could easily use that float here today, but this is the beefed up version. It fishes very similar to the carp pellet, but it's got a thicker tip. It's a 2.5mm tip, and it's got a glass stem which makes it really strong, and I've yet to break one of these. So it's a punishing type of fishing this is, so you really need a strong float. And just talking about depths for the margin, I'm just going to feed a bit more bait in here, being careful not to use my allocated amount of pellets, but you've got to keep feeding it to keep the big fish there. Yeah, so the length of the rig corresponds with a top kit plus 1 in the actual fishing position, and this is my favourite rig for this type of fishing because it makes you so much faster, because you're literally putting the bait on. I need to wet these up a bit because I've already explained they need to be a bit wetter than what you're throwing in. They can be all the same dampness for throwing in. It doesn't really matter about what you're throwing in. The more water you've got in the pellets, the better they are, because they're easier to throw, with them only being 2 mils. They swell up more, so it gives you more bait, especially for today. And they go on the hook better. You get a slower breakdown time when it's in the water. So just as a demonstration, I've put my bait on there. It's important not to squeeze it really hard. And I'm just going to pendulum the rig off the end of my top kit into the position exactly where I fed the bait. And once it's there, you've got the perfect marker to throw your bait. And the float's moving about quite a lot. And there's a bow wave there, so I've missed the fish there straight away. Some clouds of silt come up there from the fish that's bolted out. So early signs, looks like we're going to catch a few fish here. So I'm starting fishing my margin now, and I'm going to pick a nice size. Incidentally, they are the 2 mil feed pellets that I'm feeding. All the bait's exactly the same. I've just wetted these up a bit to make them a bit heavier, and then that way I throw them in. It might make you laugh what I'm going to say here, but you throw them in like a man. You know, you don't pussyfoot around like they were casters. You've got to make them hit the water and make a noise. And the heavier the pellets are, with plenty of water in, the more noise they make, and that just brings fish in. They know what pellets sound like, and you've got to, you know, make it happen. Keep throwing them in. Really, I'm feeding too much for my bait limit, what I've been assessed with today, but when we run out, and hopefully I can catch some nice fish in the meantime. You can see there's fish on the top. They're not really ready for feeding yet, but there's signs of fish down there. So this is, the way to put paste on. I've done it time before in a video, but it's always good for a recap, is pick a bit out that it's the size you want to be using, and get it in your fingers in a reasonable sort of round sort of shape, so it's easy to just press the hook onto it and cut the line through it halfway, and then just simply patch it up with the 3 fingers on each hand, and that's it, and that will hang off your pole. So that goes for both rigs I've just explained, but on the harder days I'd use the shorter rig. But I can be really accurate with this, again, because I do it all the time. I'm just going to swing round a bit towards my margin, and I'll just pendulum that off my top kit, spot on. And as I've done that, my float's there to aim at, and add a bite then. Comes part and parcel with this type of fishing. You miss loads and loads of bites, but you're doing no harm whatsoever, because your paste is feeding the peg. As well as you're throwing bait in, your paste is feeding it. And you need to be going in, 1 in 10 drops is a good average to catch a fish. You're not going to catch a fish every drop in, no chance of that. 1 in 5 is really good, but 1 in 10 is a steady sort of catch rate. You'll get an odd big fish through the last few hours and top up the amount of fish I've had on the feeder. So it's a really active way of fishing this, but you've got to give them the bait, and as I say, throw it in hard so it makes a noise. And you've not got to squeeze that on very hard. It just wants to be on hard enough to withstand the momentum of putting the rig in the water. There's a bow wave there, so there's plenty of fish here. It will take a bit to get them used to what I'm doing here, but hopefully before too long we'll be into a few fish, some bigger fish than what we were catching on the feeder. You don't get long again with this bait. It's only in not much more than a minute, and most of your bites come within that time. Just getting liners for now, and this is typical. You've got to get them confident, just like I mentioned on the feeder earlier in the day. It's a case of keep going in with your paste bait and throwing your bait on top of the float. We'll start getting the fish confident. There's fish there, but they just need to get confident for now. Another bow wave going out the peg there. You can see the fish there that's just missed the bite, or an indication on that one, about £6, but we're still building the peg up at the minute. They're not confident yet. You need your first fish and then we should start getting a few after it. Starting to get a few, hooking a few fish now. I think this is my first decent carp, so it's good signs. We'll have a few more, but I've got to hold on to my bait. It's going down. I'm halfway down my tub now. Feels all right fish this. Easily the biggest of the session so far. Using the Preston 17 hollow, which is my favourite paste elastic. And it's ideally matched to 017 main line, straight through. Rare if ever I get broke on it. I've also got, I've already mentioned about the extra section if I'm fishing a short line, but you need another one, your number 4 as well. Because especially at the glebe, I don't know if you'd ever need it here, but the glebe, you get some big fish there that'll take you right into the middle of the lake. Feels a right good fish this. I'm sure I've hooked it in the mouth. Saying that, I need to add a section now. Don't know why I've picked my landing net up so early. But whilst you're playing this fish, you need to keep throwing bait in to get them there. It's took this time to get this fish here, so you've got to keep the bait going in, but I can see what's going to happen. I'm just going to start catching a nice run of big fish here and I'm going to run out of bait. But I'm just making the most of it. Playing it a bit gingerly because it's my first decent fish out the margin. Feels a bit strange because playing a fish, you've normally got a short length of line to your float, fishing traditional short line tactic. Big ghosty just come out my peg there, see it there, probably can't see it, but that's been feeding on in my margin, but I can't catch him while I'm playing this fish. Yeah, that's a nice fish. Lovely. So first of many, hopefully, well, until my bait lasts. Quick hold up for the camera, 7 or 8 pounder. Yeah, that's that. I think that's that ghosty that come out earlier. Just seen it. Lovely bite. It's quite a good fish, this is. There it is. It's the same fish that swam out earlier. Look at that, not fighting that hard for some reason. Normally they do. Oh, that's a lovely fish. Landed it in record time. That's that same fish that swam out when I were playing that bigger fish earlier. Look at that for a fish. So I'm really rushing, well, starving my bait box at the minute. I've got enough for probably one more fish, the way I'm needing to feed it to catch big fish like this. A quick holding shot, because it's a really nice fish, this. That's again on £10, that. Oh, that's beauty. So I'm not sure if I'm defeating the object here, because I'm running out of bait. It's making me not feed as what I want to feed, which is not doing the peg any good. You've really got to put the bait in. Big fish like that one I've just caught need to eat bait. That's why they come in the margin. You can see that's remaining out of one soak bag of Fin Perfect 2 mils. There's enough there to catch at least one more fish, but I'm not going to catch many more than that. There's more and more fish coming into the margin now, because I know that the movement from them is just taking my float away from where it needs to be. The tail patterns is just moving the float out. But you can see how fast way of fishing this is. I know you're going in and out with only an odd fish, but when they're that size, it don't really matter. But it's an easy way of fishing. You're not shipping a pole, you're only fishing short, and it can be really accurate once you get your pendulum action in. So once the float's there, look, you see there's fish on that straight away. Oh, there's a big tail here, right at my float. Oh, I thought I'd hooked it then. I'm going to have to admit defeat in the margin, I think. I've got 2 or 3 baits left without feeding it. I've just run out of bait. If I'd had twice enough to start with, I'd have had a right good session in the margin here, but I'm really struggling for bait now. There's a big tail there. I thought that was the bite when it went under of the fish. I seen its tail. There's a tail there as well. There's more and more fish coming, but I just need the bait. Yeah, last gasp, got one. So I'll call this my last fish, because I've run out of bait now. It's not massive, but it's a decent fish. There, it's a real carp, but not the size I'm after. So that concludes the session. I've had a really great time, to be honest. I could really do with another hour with a bit more bait down there. So don't forget to like and subscribe to Preston YouTube channel. And on that note, I'll get the fish out and see what we've actually caught on a bag of bait. So I'm just gonna, this is the net that obviously I've caught most of the fish in, and I'm just gonna lift it up, out roughly, and guesstimate how many fish I've got in there. Well, that's close to the net limit. It's got to be £55, possibly a touch more. I'm just going to roll them down the net whilst they're in the water. Shouldn't harm the fish at all. A healthy splash. There's lots and lots of fish in there. I'd say the biggest fish in this net is only £2.5. So you see how busy I was earlier on in the session. Carp of all sizes from 4 ounce right up to 2.5 pound. A really enjoyable session on the warmest day of the year.